right, so today we're going to talk about resilience. And resilience is the ability to recover from difficulties. It's toughness, it's grit, and it's something that I think you all probably would really hope to have, in addition to your animals having as well. Now, before we get started, we're going to talk really quickly just about, if I can figure out how to advance, there we go. Some of the symbols you're going to see. So if you see that bomb, we're talking about a confidence building tool. If you see those cute little ducklings, we're talking about a consistency building tool. And if you see my friend down there, the gorilla, we're talking about choice and control. And then because all of these tools really work incredibly well together, when you see the kapow symbol, you know that we're talking about using them together. So our first tool is desensitization. And desensitization, by definition, means to make less sensitive. And when I read that, I'm like, thanks a lot. That really helps. Not at all. So how do we do that? Well, luckily you guys all already know. We're going to break something down into small pieces, and we're going to systematically desensitize that animal to each individual step. So when we're training, it might look something like this. This is us working an animal to go into a crate around the corner, right? So when you first look at this picture, you might not even be able to tell that the crate is moving because the steps are so small. And I think one of the big mistakes that a lot of trainers make is we don't break our approximations down small enough. We don't split small enough. And I think it's because we're scared that we might have to compromise progress in order to think small, right? But all of these approximations were actually accomplished in about a quarter of a session. So you don't have to compromise progress in order to think small. And that's exactly the same when we're talking about desensitizing our animals to things in their environment. So this is Zuri. She's an African crested porcupine. And we had a goal of doing encounters in this new beautiful space that was built for us on a budget. You guys are familiar with that, right? So it was an open top exhibit. All the noise from the pathway comes into our encounter space. There's windows for people to bang on and look in through. The door jiggles a little bit if somebody tries to open it. Plus we're bringing new people in. They smell different, they act different, they look different, and they are different. And she's supposed to just go up there and do the thing, right? Right? No. Yeah. No, that's not exactly how it works. So we took all of those things, the sound, the sights, the smells, and we broke them down into small things. And so, for example, one of the steps that we took is we actually brought people back that we knew into her space where she was comfortable and confident. We did just one little change, and that's how we kind of started this desensitization process. Basically, we're trying to do something weird, but not too weird. If our steps are too big, we might sensitize an animal to something instead of desensitize them. So when we took the Binturong to a preschool, it wasn't the first time she'd been on a harness and a leash. It wasn't the first time she'd been in a car. It wasn't the first time she'd been in the crate. It wasn't the first time she'd met kids. But it might be the first time that all of those things kind of came together for her. So that's what I mean by doing something weird, but not too weird. We actually have a day on our calendar where our goal for sessions that day is to do something weird. So we might take the Binturong for a walk in the bathroom or walk the circle up the stairwell instead of up the elevator. But we're just constantly trying to allow our animals to experience something weird. And just like Portland, eventually weird becomes normal. Our next tool is building behavioral mass. So what I mean by this is the behaviors that we're asking our animals have so much behavioral momentum that they are like Indiana Jones's boulder. Once they're rolling, they cannot stop. And what's our biggest tool for doing this? Food, right? Most of us use food as our primary reinforcer. So we are going to pair food with the behaviors that we want to have the most mass. Now, the reason why there's only one slide on this one is because this is why all of the other tools work, especially the next two. So let's talk about our next tool. It's consistency. Now our animals are asked to be anything but consistent. They might be doing a big corporate event for a banquet. They might be doing a photo shoot. They may be asked to go off-site to a school. They might be meeting a small group of volunteers in the office. They might be doing a show on our stage or meeting a guest in our classroom. But what's consistent there for the binturong? The perch, right, exactly. So we have brought something to all of those different situations that she's familiar with, so it's consistent. And because we've worked to desensitize her to everything else that's going on, and because we've built huge behavioral mass behind that perch with primary distribution, she sees it like a big neon sign. Come here for food, right? And it really works to build her confidence in these different situations. Now this is what it looks like with our three-banded armadillo. She's trained to come to this shape to allow kids to touch her. Now, because we've worked to desensitize her to everything else, might be small kids, big kids, adults, inside, outside, upstairs, downstairs, off-site, on-site, anywhere, she sees that shape, it's consistent, right? And of course, you notice what Patty's doing there, building a huge amount of behavioral mass with that shape. She's incredibly confident in allowing these kiddos to touch her and approach her. She knows exactly what's expected of her and exactly what her expectations are. With our North American river otters, we started ambassador encounters with them in our classroom, and we taught them this mark for them to go on for photos with the guest, and they're also trained to target to the guest. When we moved them to that very scary place up on the pathway, we were a little nervous that maybe it wouldn't go so well. It was loud, scary, all of those things. So the first time we put the mark out in the space and we opened the door and we expected to have little to no attention. But they ran right out, got up on the mark and looked at us like, I'm ready for food. Again, we had paired that with food over time to sensitize them to their surroundings, and it was a big neon sign that said, work here for food. The other thing you have to make sure that's consistent is you. So twice a month we pick one behavior and we film it across numerous different trainers, and then we compile that video together, watch it back, and look for consistencies and inconsistencies. So we're going to watch this. I want you guys to see what you see. What'd you guys see? Different levels. She's going up a different height. Duration. Yeah, so we saw those things too, and we're able to talk to each other and say, all right, this is what we're all going to hold her criteria and duration-wise moving forward. And that really helped build consistency amongst the staff. How many of you have more than one supervisor that you have to report to? Wow, not very many of you, lucky you. I typically have at least 3 dads that I have to report to each day. And when they're all expecting the same thing out of me, it's so much easier and I have so much more confidence because I know exactly what's expected. And our animals aren't any different than that. Now our fourth tool is safe places. Okay, more audience participation. How many of you do drills at your facility? That's not every hand, so we might need to talk about that later. How many of you guys in an emergency have had to respond to an emergency and are actually more confident because you practiced those drills? Right. Knowing what to do in an emergency really boosts our confidence and helps us bounce back much better after an emergency as well because we felt prepared going into it. Our animals are the same. So for our serval, she really prefers to be up tall on something high. So we offer her this crate, and we have trained her that this is where you go. If a helicopter flies overhead, if a small child bum rushes you to touch you, you are going up on this cart. And of course, we're also working to desensitize her to scary things so that scary things aren't so scary. We've paired the cart with lots of food, and she's got this consistency of it always being there. Now, this is just about communicating to your animal what you expect them to do in an emergency and practicing it. It can be anything. It's got to work for you, your situation, your animal, and all of those variables that are going to be different for all of you. Just as Ken says, it depends, right? So it's going to depend on your situation what you pick. But regardless, tell your animal what you expect in case of an emergency. They'll be more confident when one actually happens. Our last tool is something we call control indicators. So these are opportunities for our animals to say, I would like to keep going, or I would like to stop. So for this serval, she has 5 control indicators before she's out on her walk. She has to go on this mark and let the trainer enter. She lets us put on the harness and leash. She goes in the crate, or harness and collar. She goes in the crate. She lets us put on the leash. She comes out of the crate. And if she doesn't do any of those 5 control indicators, we stop the session. We don't keep going. So it's her opportunity to say, yeah, I'm good today. Or no, I'd really rather not. Here's what it looks like in our African crested porcupine. This is her first control indicator. So she goes to this station in the back corner when the trainer approaches her enclosure. She gets fed if she goes to it. If she doesn't, which in the heat of the summer, she often chooses to sleep in the corner of her enclosure instead of coming out, then we just don't go on a walk that day. In addition to starting our encounters, we also want them to be able to end. Now, we use this mostly with our North American river otters, but this is a choice for them to end the session. We put this shape that you can see in the background here in their space during every session, and if they touch their nose to the shape, then the session ends in whatever way is normal. So if we're in the meet and greet space, we'll put the otter back in the crate, feed them, shut the door, take them home. If we're in their enclosure, we might just put food down, take the shape, and leave. Whatever way is normal for them. Now I'm going to show you a video of what this looks like in action, but I'm going to have a little disclaimer. This is a behind the scenes area, not an exhibit area. And this happens maybe most frequently once a week that they choose into session. And so it's not very often, and it's really hard to get a video of. So it's not the greatest video. You can't even see the otter for half of it. We train really fast. If you don't cue while your animal is chewing, you're likely to have much more success as well. And that's it. And more than likely, she ended that session because I was not doing a great job at being a trainer. So I had to really look back at that video and say, what if I was pushing too hard? What was I doing? Were my approximations too big? And it's just a signal to us, hey, I'd like to be done now. You screwed up. So our animals aren't very much unlike us when it comes to confidence and resilience. So desensitization for our animals is like experience for us. The more experience you have, the more confident you are, right? Primary distribution is like setting clear expectations. It's saying this right here, this is what I expect from you. This is their job description. This is their paycheck. Tells them this is exactly what I want you to do. Marks, stations, all of those things, that's consistency. And the more consistent life is, the more confident you are. Also, the more resilient you are. If the same thing happens 100 times and one time something weird happens, then the next 100 times aren't so scary because you know more good has happened than bad. Okay. There we go. Safe places are just like practice and preparedness for us. The more you practice, the more prepared you are, the more resilient and confident you're going to be. And these control indicators are like clear two-way communication. I know I have people I feel great communicating with, and I'm more confident in those relationships than I am in relationships where either I don't feel comfortable communicating to them or they don't feel comfortable communicating to me. And just one little bonus here, let me get on my soapbox. It's not about winning. So often, especially when we are under pressure, We want that animal to comply. Those moor parkers out there, Gary comes to your session and you're like, you have to do this, he's here, right? And they're done that. It's the same thing out in the real world too. And we forget that this is about a partnership. I am not 100% compliant all the time. I don't know about you guys, so I don't really expect my animals to be either. So this is kind of what it looks like in real life. How to create confident ambassador animals. And here's an example. Binturong loses interest in cues and decides she needs to go investigate a new object and another new object. Then returns her focus back to the trainer. The trainer asks for a few behaviors and has great focus, gets positive reinforcement from her trainer there. We recrate a lot in mid-session. We want the crate to be the strongest behavior that we have. We want that crate to be the safe place in any scary or unknown situations. Binturong's going to get distracted here again in just a minute. And you'll notice Bree gives her a little bit of slack on the leash. And then it is going to bridge and reinforce when she's back with her. Gonna have great focus up the stairs here. You'll see the Binturong check in with her trainer. That's what Bree bridges and reinforces for. And then Bree's gonna ask a behavior here. The Binturong's gonna ignore the behavior politely. And Bree's gonna let her. She's never gonna pick a battle with the animal. She's gonna let the animal win. Now, if the Binturong was trying to drag her into the street or into a flaming fire, Bree is going to use her leash as a secondary safety measure. But you'll notice most of this session, the leash is loose and the Binturong is exploring with her. We want our animals to have the choice and control to investigate their world. And she's just so cute. So that's my dream. My dream is that we have animals who participate because they want to, not because they're so hungry that they have to, or because we're holding so tight on the leash that they don't have an option to do something else. That they really see us and they see that they're going to get to go experience the world with us, that it's a partnership with us. And I think that the best way to do that is to build confidence and resilience in our animals, but more importantly, building confidence and resilience in yourself. Thank you. Questions for Lindley?
What were your approximations to train the end of session choice?
So we didn't train it. We just, we did. You train all the time, right? But we put it in the space. If they touched it, we ended the session. So it was just immediately there. So the first few times it wasn't an intentional touch. It took about a month for them to recognize, like, oh, when I touch this, you leave. And then you could see a calculated choice, like asking a new behavior. They'd look at you, and they'd go, nah, you're kind of pushing too hard. I'm going to go over here. And they'd touch it, and we'd leave. We see an increase seasonally when there's things more important than food, like boyfriends and killing competition. And I have a whole paper about that if you guys want to read one.
I saw someone else over here. It was the same question.
Oh, same question.
Just to build on that one, when I saw on that one when the otter touched it, you rewarded them for that, correct? You kind of just tossed them, whatever, to the side, and then is that how you did it? You rewarded and then you would step out. Did you ever see them doing it first, where they like, wait a second, like, why I want to keep going?
So we always ended the session with a little bit of food. So we were rewarding them for touching the shape by leaving food, but that's also how we would end every session. And then that opportunity for food left. So they learned pretty quickly, like, okay, I can get quick food right now if I touch this, but then the rest of the food leaves. So they have kind of an option of, do I want to keep working, or is food not that important? And we work our otters pretty fat, so food's not always that important, but we never saw a correlation with, like, I'm just going to end to get the food. All right, we're out of time. Thanks.